May 2024. We have present Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery, Cooper, Cowan. We have apologies for Councillor Devlin and Councillor Cowie is substituting. We have present Councillors Fagan. We don't have Councillor Ferguson-Miller in the meeting. We have present Councillors Hamilton, Kerr, Logan, Loudon, Hugh MacDonald, McAllen, McClymont. We have apologies for Councillor McCreary and Councillor Corbett is substituting. We have present Councillors Leslie MacDonald, McGeever, McLachlan. We have apologies from Councillor Nelson and Councillor Hose is substituting. And we have present Councillors Razak, Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. We also have present various officers. I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. Can I come now to item 1, which is declarations of interest? If you have any declarations to make, could you make them now? David Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. Declaring an interest in item 9 as I am the Chair of Cairn Repair Lanarkshire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. We'll deal with that at the appropriate point. If there are no others, can we come to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions in the minutes of the previous meeting? I don't see any questions, so can we agree those as a correct record?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Come now to item 3 on the revenue budget monitoring paper, and I will ask Jackie Taylor to speak to that report. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular revenue budget monitoring report. This takes us to the 23rd of February this year. If I take you to section 4, just a reminder of our probable outturn position that we've reported to committee previously. That was reporting an underspend expected for the year of £9 million. That was after transfers to reserves. And it was approved that that £9 million probable outturn underspend would be transferred to reserves, with £3 million being set aside to support budget pressures in 24-25, and the remaining £6 million being considered to support the Council's budget strategy, including pay. Following that agreement, the break-even position for the Council is expected for this year. Over on page 14 at section 4.3, I'm reporting that as we received our final settlement for 24-25 at the end of February, that document also provided some information around formal confirmation of grant redeterminations for the financial year that we've just finished, 23-24. The majority of these amounts had already been uploaded into resources budgets during the year, and only additional funding for school staff training of £57,000 and a further expected allocation for pay, which was £402,000, has now been added into this report. The Finance Order also confirmed, as I previously reported, that the £2.9 million held back in respect of teacher numbers had been paid out. Section 5 of the report takes us to the 23rd of February in your position, and we're reporting a net underspend of £1.76 million, and that's in line with our expectations and leading us to where we expect to be by the end of the year. The housing revenue account is detailed at section 6 of the report, and we're reporting a break-even position against the phased budget. So if I take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the break-even position after transfers to reserves is noted, that the underspend of £1.76 million to the 23rd of February is noted, and that the break-even position on the housing revenue account is noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If there are any questions, could you please indicate now? Not seeing any questions, so we will agree that report and move to the next item, which is on the capital budget monitoring paper. Back to you, Jackie.
Thank you very much. So this is the capital monitoring for 23-24 for the same period, taking us to the 23rd of February. And updates covered at section 4 of the report on page 19. We have a revised programme of £78.365 million, which is an increase of £69,000 on the previously reported position. That takes into account the distribution for the free school meals monies that I mentioned in the last report. Over on page 20 at section 4.4, just a reminder again on what we expect to spend by the end of the financial year. We're reporting an outturn of around £72 million, which is a net underspend of £6.3 million. This is in relation to timing of projects, and the funding for the projects that remain unspent at the end of the financial year will be carried forward to allow the projects to complete into 24-25. A list of the main projects that make up that underspend are attached in Appendix 3 on page 25, as we've done to previous committees. So in terms of recommendations, we're asking that the period 12, so to the 23rd of February position, is noted, and that the programmes will continue to be monitored by the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this paper? Could you please indicate now? Don't see any questions, so can we agree that report and come to item 5? Jackie.
Thank you very much. So this is our additional funding report that details any additional funding that we've received since the last committee. The details are included in Appendix 1 and 2 of the report, which are on page 31 and 32. The additional resources that I'm covering in this report are the ones that I mentioned in the first report that I covered, and that's around additional revenue funding of £459,000, and that's for school staff training and pay, and in capital, £69,000, and that's in relation to the free school meals money. I just wanted to update as well that 2 days ago we received communication from the government advising that we would be getting our distribution of the Barnett consequentials money that had previously been committed to come to local authorities. We'll consider that correspondence and we'll include that in the next monitoring cycle. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Again, I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree that report? And we'll come now to item 6, which is the first of our items for decision. This is on the Transformation Fund proposals. Stephen Gibson is going to speak to this paper. Stephen.
Yep. Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The purpose of this report is to advise on the themes and criteria that are used to identify investment in property assets through the Transformation Fund, and to seek approval for a first tranche of investment through the proposals. The background to the report is in section 3. It advises that in light of significant budget pressures facing local government up and down the country and the challenges of net zero, we along with our peers have been given consideration to identify what we should do to define what the Council's core estate or core property estate should be. And secondly, where that funding for modernisation, capital investment, repairs and maintenance budgets should be focused. In recognition of the challenges arising from the property estate managed by the Leisure Trust and the Council, we approved a £30 million for capital investment in February 2023, and the purpose was to help modernise the leisure and cultural estate, optimise the use of assets and to assist in the transition towards net zero. Section 3.4 confirms that a fund of £13 million was to be included within the Council's financial plans and in the capital programme, and this is what's become known as the Transformation Fund. Section 4 of the report discusses establishing the themes and priorities, and it suggests how the Transformation Fund should be managed and the purposes and proposes an approach based on 4 criteria. In considering the objectives of the Transformation Fund, projects have been assessed on the basis that they must relate to properties that are owned and managed by the Trust, and they must fall under one of the 4 themes set out in section 4.2. So to qualify for funding, the objectives must revolve around adaptation and modernisation, energy efficiency and decarbonisation, the reduction of liabilities or demolition, and finally, community accessibility. Themes 1 and 2 are aimed at extending the useful life of the properties. It's about maximising the opportunities for increased use, generating income and reducing expenditure. Theme 3 is about focus on the removal of revenue costs associated with a small number of properties that have been lying vacant for a considerable period of time, and enabling that land to be considered for an alternative purpose. Theme 4, the clues in the name, is about exploring mechanisms for community organisations that are more readily involved in the management, or to become more readily involved in the management of these facilities. The proposed projects are described in section 5. Section 5.1 tells you that using information collated previously, officers for community and enterprise and housing and technical resources, as well as the Trust and colleagues in finance, have worked together to identify priorities for investment in order to sustain and modernise the services, and these are set out in Appendix 1. At this stage, detailed project briefs have not been finalised, and therefore we're working on the basis of high-level budgets. Work's underway to create the detailed brief for each property, setting out the specification, the outcomes and a more specific budget. Section 5.4 comments on Phase 2. It confirms that we intend to undertake a feasibility studies for larger projects such as Chatler Row, Calder Glen Country Park, new museum stores and Fairhills Lifestyles, and that this work will generate detailed proposals and a range of projects under Phase 2. We intend to write a Phase 2 proposal in Q3 of this financial year. An element of the funding has been suggested to support the changes to the library service arrangements. However, at this stage, work is ongoing to establish the most appropriate approach. If I could take you to the recommendations, these are in Section 2. The committee is asked to approve the following: that the first phase of investment for the Transformation Fund, amounting to £8.4 million, as set out in Appendix 1, is approved, and it has been noted that proposals for a further phase of investment will be prepared in consideration in Q3 of this financial year. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Can I ask if you have any questions? Could you please indicate now? Before I take the questions, I just wanted to offer a brief reflection, because the issues that sit behind this have been long-standing over many years. And I think the way that the council, and I say council as a whole, has chosen to tackle the issue has been the right one. We've got to be open about the challenges, open about the financial challenges, the quality of the estate, the imperative that sits behind a transition to net zero. And we've also had to be honest, and we've had to be prepared to ask people to pay that little bit more in their council tax, not in this year's budget, but in the previous year's budget, still with the lowest council tax in mainland Scotland, in order to fund investment. And that approach that was endorsed by the council was the right one. It's making the investment that is included in this paper today possible. And I want to thank all the councillors and the council groups that supported us in taking that position. I'll now take some questions. If anyone, I think I said, if anyone wishes to ask a question, if you please indicate now. I will come in the first instance to John Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It's to do with item 5 and Appendix 1. I see here that we have a list of buildings that we're hoping to spend money on to protect infrastructure, etc. Can we be sure that the conversations we've had with other groups and councils, such as SLLC, for instance, will make sure that we're not going to be spending money on any projects which at the end of the day are not going to be able to be taken ahead because of budgets? So it's just some clarification on that. Thanks.
Stephen?
Okay, thank you. I'll start. I know that David might contribute as well, but certainly, of course, that would be the intention. You know, we don't want to be spending money on assets that won't be there in the distant future. So we're prioritising investment.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much, Councillor Ross. Yes, as Stephen highlighted there, what we've tried to do in pulling together this list of projects is to try and reflect the estate as it is and the estate as it requires to be in the future. The financial outlook, as we know, is a difficult one, and that will in and of itself make us look very carefully at how our estate is developed in the future. But you can see from the list of facilities here and the type of projects that we're trying to pull together, that what we're trying to do here is to try and put the adaptations in place that actually prepare these properties as we go into the future, and try to invest in the areas that maximise the customer experience, thereby increasing, hopefully, footfall and income to SLLC, which helps overall future financial position. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Could I come now to Katie Loudon?
Morning, Chair. Morning, everyone. Thank you for the report. We've obviously got a nominal figure here of 300k for library services on page 38. I appreciate at 5.5 it says work still ongoing to establish the most appropriate approach here. Appropriate, perhaps doing a bit of heavy lifting, because it was clear in the last briefing that we got on the 26th of April, we're potentially talking about book lending services only in many cases where there are going to be these adaptations, and that's not what a library is. It's not solely book lending. I've picked out about 5 examples from that briefing on the 26th that we might expect have made up where this 300k is coming from just now. For example, we've been told costs are being developed for the Willie Waddell Centre for lending services, Blantyre Leisure Centre, costs are being developed for some services, Cambuslang Institute space for book lending being investigated, Eastfield, we've been told if there's significant investment, there might be a library type provision, not very clear what that is yet, and at Hill House, investigations into adapting the creche in the community centre. If these locations are still being developed or proposals for them, then it's still a bit opaque where this figure is coming from. So I've got a few questions on that. Are these the 5 projects which are all included in this 300k estimate just now? Or are there any other ones, or are there any which are missing from that list? Is any IT infrastructure or provision included in these costs, either improvement or putting anything in? So would these costs include any sort of infrastructure links to the library catalogue or other services? And when will we next get a briefing on the progress of the work and an update to this figure? Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm going to ask David to respond to that one, but feel free, Stephen or anyone else, to come in if you think it would be useful. I would say before I do that, it is a fluid situation, and so the specific costs are always going to reflect the specific solutions we arrive at. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Loudon. As I highlighted in the briefing note on the 26th of April, it is a very, as the Chair points out, a very fluid and a very dynamic situation. The first sort of stage, what we're trying to do as a project team looking at this is to cast the net as wide as possible in terms of where a solution might be found for those libraries within scope. From that then, we are looking at individual properties to see if how we could tailor a solution to that. And through that process, some of these properties will be discounted and others will become more prominent. The paper that was sent on the 26th is to give all elected members an understanding of how we're going about that process and what the initial thinking is around each of the solutions. But these are still in development. There continue to be a number of a range of different site visits and assessments. We're taking account of a lot of criteria, such as location, access to car parking, DDA access, and then from that we'll start to have some emerging projects which will be costed in detail. And from that we'll get a greater understanding of how much will be required to be spent, both in terms of capital and revenue to continue with a form of operation. So the figure of £300,000 is what I call a risk figure at this stage. It's an element of money that we've set aside, recognising that we will require to spend money on adaptations, but it doesn't have sitting behind it any of the technical data that would be required to get to more robust costs, and because that will come as we seek solutions for each of the libraries impacted. And even since that briefing note last week, there have been again further developments on that as we work at pace on it. Thank you.
Could I have a supplementary, Chair, please?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for that answer. I guess the obvious question then is if there's been further development since the briefing note, when can we expect an update?
David?
Yep, thank you very much. So what we intend to do this in 2 forms of as we start to emerge and we get some solutions in each individual areas. One of the things that we would intend to do would be to update the members within that area, also keeping the board of SLLC updated, and then in addition to that there will be additional briefing papers on or, you know, a regular briefing paper similar to the one that we received on the 26th of April, which will give that wider landscape and changing. So in terms of I don't have a kind of set criteria, it will be as we reach what we consider to be key milestones. But as individual solutions start to emerge, as quickly as possible, we would intend to engage with local elected members and the board of SLLC through SLLC to make sure that our local members are aware of where the direction of travel is. Thank you.
Okay, can I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I really wanted not so much to ask a question as to welcome the report, because this is actually a reasonably comprehensive report at this stage. It's moving forward on the money we provided last year, as you touched on. And I say we, this is really money provided by the citizens of South Lanarkshire through the additional provision that we made, and against the background of the thinning capital support from central government. I'd like particularly to welcome, I think, two aspects of it. There's investment going into the gym and fitness studio element, and as I understand it, one of the aspects of that is it's one of the more profitable bits of the service, and it enables us to provide updated and modernised facilities in that regard, which will in fact enable us to be, if you like, market leaders to some degree in that particular regard. And perhaps not surprising, I'm also happy to welcome the following item, which relates to Hamilton, Rotherham and Lanark Town Halls. Now, these are the jewels in the crown in many regards. They're the key facilities across the council, and particularly with regard to the 900th anniversary of the Royal Borough of Rutherglen coming up in 2026. It's great to see the extra investment going into the town hall and the registrar's area nearby, which I think will contribute towards continuing to have first-class facilities in these particular areas. And I think this is really good investment, which is well-focused and will hopefully make a considerable difference to the viability of our leisure estate across the coming years. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Couple of things. First of all, just to confirm what I believe, that none of the assets identified here for funding are subject to an asset transfer request or anything at the moment. And secondly, if they did become subject to an asset transfer, would these improvements still take place? Or what would happen? Secondly, our second point, just picking up there, I welcome the only investment in Clydesdale is to Lanark Town Hall. But that does seem a little bit strange when in the last few years it's just had a major refurbishment. Sorry if I've missed one, Paul. But
Right. I think I can see people checking their appendices right now. I'll come back maybe to Stephen just to try and pick up, if you're able to pick up on those points just now. Yeah.
Just now. Sorry, I don't know if I came out there. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so none of them are subject to an asset transfer just now. And of course, I can't control whether or not we would become subject to an asset transfer.
Yes, and the second point I think you had was about Lanark Memorial Hall. Lanark Memorial Hall.
Sorry, Councillor Allison, could you repeat that one? The Lanark Memorial Hall.
yeah, it was welcoming the investment in it, but a little bit surprised because it was subject to a major improvement not so long ago, and needing further modernisation seems as if we hadn't got it right the previous time. The second part of my first question was what would happen if any of these assets did become subject to an asset transfer? Would this investment still take place?
I think the answer to that is we would have to consider that at the time of the asset transfer request, but Stephen?
Yeah, I'm green now. Firstly, on Lanark Hall, I actually don't think anything's missed. That's betterment. That's an improvement. That's really good news. It's not a bad story. It's a good news story. We're doing more work in that hall, which is great. But secondly, as was suggested, that's something that would be considered at the time of receiving an asset transfer request, if in fact we did receive an asset transfer request for any of these assets.
Okay, and the final question I have is from Mo Razak.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say firstly
the Transformation Fund. I would congratulate the members who voted for the budget, because with that we managed to now do the urgent repairs that are required, and that had been long overdue for a number of years. An example I can give is Blantyre Leisure Centre. We've had for a number of years had issues with it. In fact, it's £1 million being spent on the redevelopment of that is welcomed. And on the second part would be the improving the accessibility of 11 sites, and I think that's to be congratulated as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. There are no other questions, so can I ask that we agree the report? Agreed. You are agreed. Can I come now to item 7, which are the recommendations referred to us by the Community and Enterprise Resources Committee. Ian Strachan is going to speak to this report. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. The purpose of this report is to request approval of the following recommendations referred to the Executive Committee by the Community and Enterprise Resources Committee of 23rd April, and that's in respect of Centre West Shopping Centre, East Kilbride, and transfer of ownership to the Council, and the Glasgow City Region Deal, Stewartfield Way, East Kilbride Town Centre. In the usual way, we've got extracts of the minute in respect of those two items at paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2. In respect of Centre West Shopping Centre, the committee decided that firstly, the position in relation to the administration of the centre and the associated risks to the council be noted, that entering into a heads of terms with Interpath for the transfer of the centre to the council be endorsed, that the appointment of a professional team to manage the transfer of ownership of the centre to the council and subsequent demolition be endorsed, and that the recommendations be referred to the Executive Committee for approval. And then in respect of Stewartfield Way, East Kilbride Town Centre, the committee decided firstly, that the proposed next steps in developing the outline business case and delivering the project be endorsed and referred to this committee for approval, and that a report be submitted to the Glasgow City Region Programme Management Office following endorsement by the committee and approval by the Executive Committee to seek permission to rescope the project and develop the outline business case for a Stewartfield Way and East Kilbride Town Centre project. And the recommendations are that the committee is asked to approve. Firstly, the proposed approach to ensure a smooth handover of the Centre West Shopping Centre to the council be approved, and that the proposed next steps in developing and delivering Stewartfield Way East Kilbride Town Centre infrastructure project be approved. And got colleagues from Community and Enterprises here to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we come to that, can I just say these are two papers that are linked in a number of ways, if anyone is familiar with the proposals will know. I do want to, before we approve it, I suppose just make the point that it has been a fluid situation, particularly in Stewartfield Way. That is an issue the council has been grappling with for a number of years. I think the project, as it comes forward, is maybe not the project a number of us would have initially envisaged or indeed supported, but we've obviously had to compromise with each other. We've had to compromise with the financial reality. We've had to compromise with the environmental realities that are coming from other regulations and imperatives being driven down towards the council. And I think we are at a stage where we can confidently say the money that was set aside for East Kilbride in that City Deal programme is retained in East Kilbride, even if the shape of the project looks different, and even if the project is not ideally what we would have expected, it achieves that objective for us and it invests substantially in the town's economy. One thing I would say to the committee is that certainly for me, I've been working through a number of my own thoughts in this project. I can see it Collins here, which is quite helpful. There was a suggestion that we could take the investment there and just focus on the Kingsgate end in its entirety. What this is proposing to do is make the substantial roads investment at the Kingsgate end, but transfer a substantial sum into the town centre redevelopment. Colin, could you maybe just, the total envelope of the project is about 63 million. Could you maybe just compare the costs there with what we think that flyover investment might have come to? And then, sorry, I should say, if anyone has any of their own questions or points, please indicate now and I'll come to you. Colin.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of what the original project looked like, members will maybe recollect it was full dualling and a flyover, and in the early part of 2019, a review of the cost took that project, including the flyover, up to about 120 million. So clearly with a budget of 62.2, with a bit of a shortfall there. We reviewed the scope of the project at that time. We went to the communities for a consultation event in September 2019. And the project was refined back down to 62.2 million. There was a condensed dualling element just at the western end, and at the eastern end there was a bit of a discussion about how much of the dualling in the middle part across the front of James Hamilton was necessary. So the project that was on the table, it came to the June 21 City Deal Cabinet, and I think it came to the April Exec Committee. Was for a £62 million project, of which about 35–40 million of that was the dualling element alone, with the balance made up of supporting walking, cycling, bus infrastructure, EV infrastructure elements as well. They were all scalable, and the 30 million that makes up the current project, with the 32.2 going towards the town centre, that 30 million will allow us to deliver much of the original road infrastructure proposals. We'll be tapping into some other funding from Cycling, Walking, Safer Routes, Transport Scotland and Active Travel to complement the project. But I'm still confident that the 30 million will deliver what's needed to improve the transport network efficiency, not the road network efficiency, the transport network, because you need to remember that roads take a lot more than cars. They take bus, they take walking, they take cycling, they take freight as well. So hopefully that answers your question, Chair.
No, my question was about, these are the proposals that appeared in front of committee, but at one point there was a suggestion that we could consolidate the investment around a flyover option, which would be an almost entirely roads investment, which was attractive to a number of people, but maybe probably wouldn't have hit the criteria that we've had to grapple with over the past couple of years. My question was, where did we think, I think it was in excess of 100 million, where did we think a kind of flyover project was likely to come in at in terms of cost versus the £62 million that we have available to us?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, your question's clearer now. The current cost of a flyover project on its own was circa 100 million. In terms of, obviously, over the last 2-3 years, we've had significant inflationary costs and a flyover, significant reinforcement. So you could be up in excess of 100 million, which again is significant variance to the funds that are available.
Right. Okay, thank you. Can I take Andrea Cowan?
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted really to make a couple of points. I think that the investment at that end around Kingsgate is where the money should be spent. We've now got that new stadium that seats up to 10,000 people, and you probably know that to get into that area you have to drive away up to the next roundabout. So putting a junction in there seems an ideal solution to that. I think their car park's going to hold 2,500 cars. So getting those cars in and out as efficiently as possible, I think benefits the local community and also benefits the stadium, which we want to be a success. So I think that's a wise spend of the money. On the Stewartfield Way project, the other thing just to say is with the East Kilbride City Centre project, obviously money from the City Deal being reallocated. And I just think that this is an excellent opportunity. We're talking perhaps about 300 units of housing in the city centre, and I think that's a fantastic project as well, given the housing pressures on East Kilbride. We know that that's where the strongest demand is for housing. So really delighted to hear that, and I would just ask that as far as can possibly be, that these houses are for social rent, that we don't just sell that ground off to a builder who's going to make a fortune, that we try obviously there are financial restraints and I appreciate that, but I think this is an opportunity to bring a lot of social housing into our portfolio, and I just hope that that's considered. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. I want to make a few points about the dualling aspect of the Stewartfield Way proposals. While I do see the value and approve of the East Kilbride Town Centre proposals, I have questions and points to make about the dualling aspect of the Stewartfield Way proposals. £30 million is a lot of money and doesn't come along every day. We hear all the time how money is tight, and all of us have a responsibility to ensure we get the maximum bang for our buck for the public money and do no harm. Today, we elected members have a choice. The administration, who pledges to ratchet up climate and community wealth building action, have a choice. The council, who have a duty to act to contribute to emissions reductions, has a choice. Supporters of the Scottish Government, who pledge to reduce road miles travelled by 2030, have a choice. Anyone who wants to a livable planet must make the right choice today. So, do we approve this potentially high carbon road expansion project without the information we have to assess its climate impact? And by the way, environmental impact assessments don't take carbon emissions into account. Or do we get the information we need to make informed decisions whilst also taking forward the many projects on our books that we know will address climate change, reduce poverty and build community wealth? The project has been changed and it can be changed again. I choose the latter and propose an amendment today as follows. In recognition of the Council's duty to act in a way that contributes to Scotland's emissions reductions, the Council decides to postpone a decision on Stewartfield Way, instructing officers to bring back to elected members the following information to inform future decision making. 1. A climate impact assessment of the Stewartfield Way proposals. 2. Removal of any project element which increases climate damaging emissions directly in contradiction to the Council's own aims to reduce emissions. And 3. Proposals to use the remaining City Deal funding for projects that are low carbon, address poverty and build community wealth instead.
Okay, thank you very much. I've just been passed a note of that amendment. I'm going to ask you in a second for a seconder, but can I, before we come to that, if it's helpful to the committee, come back either to David or Colin just to explain for the benefit of the committee when it comes to environmental and climate impact, to take that point, what is the process that we would work through before the project is approved?
Thanks, Chair. Just kind of picking up Councillor Robb's points in turn there. The environmental impacts or climate impacts, they're not an add-on to any project of this scale. They are an integral part of it, and sometimes not all the information that people would like is available at the start. So within the strategic business case, it was approved in June 21. There was an outline and a framework of how we would assess the impact of the project as it looked at that time. What we're looking today is to move forward via the outline business case stage. And then obviously if we get approval of that, move on to the full business case, but running in parallel with that would be the scheme development. And a major project like this will go through a whole series of assessments, including a full environmental impact assessment, where the kind of pros and cons of the scheme. And obviously a road building project on its own will have some negative impacts. It's by the very nature of it, it will. But there are obviously lots of positive impacts in terms of reduction in emissions associated with congestion, encouraging walking and cycling, public transport as well. So overall, there might be some individual elements that will have impacts. That's clear. Overall, I think on balance, the project will have a kind of probably a positive beneficial impact. Members may recollect an exercise that was done in the capital programme for 24-25, where all the individual project lines were assessed. To be fair, that was a very, very high level one, and that identified the project was going to be moderate, I think minor beneficial. So I think, Chair, just to answer your point, climate impacts and environmental impacts are an integral part of scheme development, and they'll start to emerge as we move through the outline business case, the full business case, supporting information that will go in for the planning application as well via the environmental impact assessment. And I'm confident that the scheme's needed. I think the papers that were set out in the Community Enterprise Committee a few weeks ago identified the continuing economic challenges that are needed, and I think overall this project, the Stewartfield Way dualling element of it and all the associated complementary works will be beneficial. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. I've got one more point and then I'll deal with the amendment. So I've got some additional points, I think, then I'll deal with the amendment. Right, okay, can I come to Mark McGeever first?
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks to Colin as well, because that last answer's preempted some of the things I was going to ask. Essentially, I'm very glad to hear again the reassurance that the environmental impact, sustainability and climate change has been considered throughout. I think it's important to make the point that this particular project has been considered now for over 9 years, and it's been through various changes at the time. It's been overseen by the council under 3 separate administrations, and I think in my time here, that's coming up for 7 years, there's probably been very few other issues that we've discussed quite as much or scrutinised as much. And I think personally, from looking at a climate change and sustainability impact, that area of East Kilbride is quite poorly served by public transport as it stands. The bus system is not great there, and the potential for bringing in new transport links there would only get worse, in my opinion, if we got to the stage of gridlock, which is something that I know was feared if there was no change to the road network up that way. I would hope that by looking now to progress with the project, we'll get to the point where the bottlenecks around Kingsgate are alleviated. We have managed to protect the James Hamilton Retail Park and the nature reserve kind of element that's there. And hopefully it will create more opportunities for bus use and indeed for active travel in that area. So thank you very much. More of a point than a question, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I wanted to speak really as the Chair of the Communities Enterprise Committee that looked at this when it came before us a week or two ago. And we have, of course, had, as Mark rightly says, really this has been poured over probably more than any other project that I've known about during the time on the Council. I think it's important to see it against I mean, Kirsten makes some valid points, obviously, but it's important to see it against the way in which the climate change aspects are looked at in terms of the project going forward here. And what I don't think we want is a sort of fairly last-minute postponement of the matter after all these difficulties. There are, in fact, major changes have taken place here. The project which involved the flyover arrangement way back was probably a 20th century sort of project, if I can put it that way. And it's mutated very significantly towards something which has got a much greater emphasis on the public transport element, the climate change things, the active travel things, all that kind of thing as well. And it's important to recognise that the movement of the £32 million to the East Kilbride Town Centre has the effect, really, of focusing town centre living, 20-minute neighbourhoods, all that kind of stuff comes as part of the delivery of the improvements to East Kilbride Town Centre. And that's a hugely important shift in emphasis as we go forward here. This is one-off money, and we know from the past that there are limits in how we can use the City Deal funding. And it's extremely important to bear that in mind. There are changes that have been able to be made here. It all remains within East Kilbride. It's focused on economic development, economic support, and movement towards a more sustainable ecology, if you like, going forward in that regard. But it is important to recognise that there are limits to what we can do under the City Deal project nevertheless. And I think the kind of suggestion that has been made, as I say, somewhat last minute, if I may say so, by Kirsten at this point, doesn't actually look as if it's going to fit within the City Deal potential anyway. Capital funding is fairly sparse for this council, and it's important we make the best use of it. My view is that after all the investigation we've had into it, the future of East Kilbride is served well by this project, by the developments we've got. There are the potential to focus very much on the developing active travel aspects as we go forward as well. These have been worked through. There's funding issues to do with some of that as well to make them happen. And I think that at the end of the day, the project as it now stands is one which needs to go forward to business case. We shouldn't have any further delay on it, and we need now to make it happen in the interest of both East Kilbride and, to be quite frank, of the sustainability of the ecology around it as well. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I come back to Kirsten, Rob?
Just to highlight, it's not last minute. I've been working on these issues for about 3 years, and you say you've pored over these issues, but has anyone ever seen a climate impact assessment for any City Deal road project? I haven't. Just to reiterate again, environmental impact assessments are about local impact. We should be doing at this stage an early climate impact assessment. That's what the motion that everybody passed was about, getting these climate impacts thought about early in the process, not at the end. And it's well known that when we increase road capacity, traffic increases, emissions increase, so it's not too radical to assume that we should do a climate impact assessment to make sure we're fulfilling our own duties as a council. We have a lot of other economically beneficial issues like social housing to deal with, or renewable community wealth building projects that will generate income for the council and address poverty and climate. We're just looking at a very narrow aspect with this project. And I think, first of all, we need to think about the climate early on at this stage, and that's all I'm asking for, is that we get that impact assessment just now. We've had years of data and modelling when we should know what the climate impact assessment is, so we can fulfil our duties. That's what I think. These all needs to be said. It all needs to go in the same direction, and at the moment we aren't.
Okay, thank you. Can I thank everyone for their contributions on this? And it is a difficult issue that the council's had to grapple with for a number of years. See, just before I do come to the deal with the amendment, maybe I'll just offer my own brief reflection, more as a local councillor than as chair or as leader. And I think for me, I'm very keen to see the investment at Kingsgate, because I think there is an issue, which is that Kingsgate is becoming the de facto retail centre for East Kilbride because of the issues in the town centre. And I think we have the opportunity, I think is been alluded to create a town centre that is much more in keeping with the concept of the 20-minute neighbourhood, with our community wealth building approaches. And the other side of it, again, as a local member, I do believe that investment in that road, and I think we were able to identify this from much earlier in the process, will help with the very local issues that I have in West Mains, where we have 2 schools on the road that I think is taking too much traffic. And I think that a road like Stewartfield Way should be taking more of that kind of traffic rather than one in a more densely populated area. See, to deal with the switch now back to dealing with this as the chair, Kirsten, do you have a seconder for your amendment? If nobody is going to indicate that they wish to second the amendment, then I believe what will happen is we will come to the paper itself, but it will be recorded that you moved an amendment in the papers. So if there's no second, I can ask the committee to agree the recommendations, otherwise in the report.
Agreed.
We're agreed. Okay. Can I come now to item 8 on the Lanarkshire British Sign Language Plan, and Michelle Milne's going to speak to this. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the progress of the shared Lanarkshire British Sign Language Plan from 2018 to 24, which shared the long-term goals of the National BSL Plan and was developed to meet the requirements of the British Sign Language Act 2015, and also to outline the proposed shared British Sign Language Plan for 24 to 30. You will note at 3.1 that the Council has developed this plan on a joint basis with North Lanarkshire Council and NHS, and this approach also applied to the first plan, which was approved at Executive in November 2018, and also the proposed plan which is presented today. Also in section 3 there is information related to Scotland's first national plan and the duty that requires the Council and all authorities in Scotland to publish a BSL plan every 6 years. At section 4 we have provided details on the BSL steering group which is in place, that is responsible for monitoring and reviewing the impact of the plan and to see the impact that is having on the lives of the deaf and deafblind BSL users, and also to ensure that long-term goals are realised. There is also information there on the membership and the role of that steering group. I would also add that in addition to that, within the Council, the current plan and an update on the new plan was provided to the Equal Opportunities Forum in February, as the BSL steering group are finalising this plan. Committee were advised that it will be updated after Executive Committee meeting today. At section 4.7, there is information on the progress that has been made in South Lanarkshire to support the long-term goals of the plan. A few highlights of this work is the ongoing schools support to young people with BSL, the work in signing that has taken place at events with South Lanarkshire Leisure, the improved SLC website and the BSL content contained within that, and BSL awareness classes that have been delivered to both employees and elected members. At section 5, there is information detailing how the shared plan has been co-produced in partnership with the deaf and deafblind BSL communities of Lanarkshire. And at sections 5.2 to 5.4, both the national BSL plan, aims and the priorities of the Lanarkshire plan are detailed within that. You'll see at section 6.3, in adopting a shared approach to developing this plan, it ensures that it is supported by the expertise of BSL users and the wider BSL community. It reduces consultation fatigue and it also maximises the ability of BSL interpreters and deafblind guide communicators, which is a really finite resource. It also shares experiences across local authorities, and it puts in place a co-produced plan which is more meaningful and accessible. Section 7 details the process of consultation and engagement that has taken place in developing the plan. And at Section 8 you will see the important next steps in using this high-level shared BSL plan for Lanarkshire to create an action plan for South Lanarkshire. It's important, as you'll note at section 8.2, that that action plan must reflect the views of the deaf and deafblind BSL community, and that this will be captured through community consultation and engagement events which will take place during August and September. At 8.3, you will see that updates on the action plan will be reported to the Equal Opportunities Committee. Formally, that will be on an annual basis, as well as through the normal resource updates that are taken to that committee. And as you know, that's already been happening, where resources detail any ongoing work in progress on equalities and inclusion activities that take place within resources. And 8.4 details the ongoing work of the BSL steering group in monitoring and reviewing the impact of this shared plan. Section 9.2 is important in terms of detailing our employee implications, which are to ensure that employees are fully aware of this shared plan and the action plan, and the range of interpretation and translation services available across Lanarkshire, and how to best work with customers and service users to ensure that they receive a fair and equal level of access. I would refer committee back to section 2 of the report, which is asked to approve the recommendations detailed there, to note the progress on the current plan and to approve the BSL shared plan for 24 to 30. Thank you.
Okay, can I thank Michelle for that very welcome report. Can I ask if there are any questions? I'm not seeing any questions. Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Can I come now to item 9? I think Councillor Shearer is going to just vacate the room for a second. And can I come to Jackie Taylor to speak to this report? Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is a paper about representation on care and repair in South Lanarkshire Advisory Committee. Council is now in a position to appoint a representative to that committee, and Councillor Walker, as Chair of the Social Work Committee, has intimated her interest in an appointment to the organisation, which she's been attending in a personal capacity. So the recommendation is that Councillor Walker is appointed as the Councillor's representative on the Care and Repair in South Lanarkshire Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I don't see any questions. Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Could I ask somebody to retrieve Councillor Shearer? And we will thank you very much. And we will come now to item 10. He's just returning. Okay, come now to item 10 on the Strathclyde Regional Bus Strategy. And Colin Parker is going to speak to this paper. Colin.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the development of the Strathclyde Regional Bus Strategy, or SRBS as I'll call it from now on, and to provide an overview of the proposed council response to the ongoing consultation. Section 3 sets out the background, and members just kind of pulling out some of the highlights. Bus services in the UK outside London were deregulated in 1986, and bus operators have been free to run any service, set their own fares and choose their own vehicles. New provisions of the Transport Scotland Act 2009 gave local transport authorities, in this case it's the SPT for this area, to develop bus service improvement partnerships, develop and manage bus franchises, and establish new, basically local run council bus companies to directly operate bus services. In 2023, SPT commenced this work, and officers have been working with them since to investigate the use of the provisions and to determine a preferred strategy to improving the bus network in the region. Through the development of the RTS, the consultation responses reaffirmed significant concerns in terms of the efficiency, performance and affordability of the bus network in Strathclyde, and similar concerns have emerged recently in relation to the development of the Council's own local transport strategy. Members may recollect a discussion in motion put forward in November 23 at the Full Council Committee at South Lanarkshire, where a motion was approved that recognised the Council's concerns in relation to the state of the bus provision across the network. And there was a compelling case for changing the model of bus provision across Strathclyde. Section 3.8 outlines the several points that the Chief Executive wrote to SPT and the Scottish Government on, outlining the concerns. And since that time, officers from the Council have been working with the SPT and to develop the SRBS. And I'm now going to go into Section 4, which provides an initial proposed response to several consultation questions that SPT have asked. Several options have been looked at by SPT, including business as usual, partnership models on a voluntary and a statutory basis, local service franchising and bus operations as well. And I'm just going to go through the various recommendations with some high-level thoughts at this stage. Recommendation number 1 was the SPT should commence work on franchising. For those of you that are not aware, local franchising is a system that allows a local transport authority, in this case SPT, to award exclusive rights to an operator to run certain bus services for a set period. SPT notes further down that section that this is a proven model for the delivery of services across Europe and beyond, and gives a great certainty of making significant improvement to the network. And it's recommended under recommendation 1, SPT should progress with that. Some key points here: it's likely to cost around 15 million to do so and take 5 to 7 years. And SPT can obviously initiate that fairly quickly, but obviously require the financial support. Recommendation number 2 goes on to talk about bus service improvement partnerships. And that recommendation is for SPT to develop and progress with one of them in the intervening periods. That has been an area of debate for both within the Council and external with partners as well. The consultation goes on to ask what's the Council's view and whether we support recommendations 1 and 2 to take forward franchising and BSIPs. In response, we intend to confirm that we strongly support the recommendation 1, which would see franchising being progressed across the area. But for recommendation number 2, we're sitting more on a kind of a neutral stance. Would a BSIP use up scarce resources at the expense of progressing the franchising model? And also as an interim measure, would the BSIP potentially entangle SPT and councils in legal agreements or challenge it could frustrate attempts to take forward the preferred option of bus franchising? I think it's important to highlight the success of BSIPs, but in that intervening period is wholly dependent on early positive engagement and agreement between partners. And some members may be aware that some partners within the kind of bus industry just now are expressing, let's just say, an area of concern about the move to kind of full franchising. So, as I said before, looking to support recommendation number 1 for franchising, but recommendation number 2, we're willing to take part in it, but more of a kind of neutral stance on that recommendation, given the reasons I've just set out. Recommendation number 3 is to set up a small-scale local bus company aimed at providing socially necessary services in parts of the regions where private operators are currently very limited. Again, SPT notes that such a bus operation will not in itself deliver the change needed. However, it may help in the short term where competition for bus contracts is limited. So again, we've been asked whether we'd support that or otherwise, with the intention to offer a modest level of support for a kind of local council bus company, but to note that a fully funded and structured business case must be developed before progressing that to the next stage. What is clear is that councils themselves will not have the necessary funding available or indeed the skills or assets to run such a company, and should that be taken forward, it would be recommended that SBT lead on that on behalf of not only South Lanarkshire but other councils as well. Recommendation number 4 is in relation to bus priority. To date, this has been funded either by Bus Partnership Fund, which has since been suspended, and or funding that's coming direct from SBT Capital Funds, which again members will be aware for 24-25 has been reduced to 0. The consultation doesn't ask specifically for comment on this proposal, but in response to that, we are obviously supportive of having faster and more reliable journey times for bus services, but care must be taken to ensure there's a balanced approach. Bus priority should not automatically mean road space reallocation. That is appropriate in some locations, and certainly I think as you get closer to Glasgow city centre, that's appropriate. But you can achieve improved bus services through kind of on-board and on-road technology. And across South Lanarkshire, we've actually done that at 61 traffic signal junctions along various corridors in Hamilton, Cambuslang, Rutherglen, Larkhall, Blantyre, Luke, Lanark and Uddingston. So quite a kind of wide range of corridors there. And we are beginning to see benefits in improved journey times for buses. The important thing there is, introducing on-road bus priority on its own can impact upon neighbouring businesses, residents, etc. as well. So care must be taken to ensure a balanced approach, and that kind of local democracy sits with councils to make that decision under the wider guise of SBT policies and regional strategies. Recommendation number 5 talks about ruling out of business as usual arrangements and voluntary partnerships. So the proposed there is clear from the motion that was passed last year by our own council that business as usual is not acceptable. So we are fully supportive of business as usual not being an acceptable way forward, and we propose to write back to SBT on that basis. With regards to voluntary partnerships, and noting the comments I said earlier around BSIPs, it suggested a neutral stance against taken in the recommendation to rule out voluntary partnerships until such time as success or otherwise of the BSIPs has been clarified and the funding that's required has been put in place. In terms of next steps, consultation closes next week and subject to discussion today. Then we plan to submit largely this paper as part of our response to the consultation. I think the only thing I would add, which is not in the paper, it's just come up in the last couple of days, is in terms of just some of the existing powers both SBT and the council have. And through a discussion among a wider group, I think there's a suggestion coming forward that maybe improved ticketing powers for SBT would be beneficial. So if we're taking forward improvements to bus services, SBT having some more powers to maybe have better integrated ticketing would be beneficial. So subject to members' agreement today, I propose to add that into this paper as we move forward with the final consultation. So just turning back to the recommendation, committee's asked to approve the contents of the paper, which intend to inform the council's response on the consultation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. Are there any questions in this report? Could you indicate now? I'll come to Mark McGeever.
Thanks very much, Chair. I know we often hear that councillors welcome reports. I think in this case there was a great amount of relief when we heard that SPT were moving in the direction that this council had been calling for frankly many years. Colin rightly mentioned the motion in 2023 that I think, Chair, you brought forward yourself, and that itself was very similar to one that we had brought forward in 2021, and we're delighted in both cases that they got support across the full council chamber. We know that franchising works elsewhere, London, Greater Manchester and Liverpool all benefiting from a system like that, and I think we really want to see SPT move in that direction as quickly as possible. This response for me sets exactly the right tone. I share the concerns that Colin alluded to, that the kind of other models, whether voluntary or the BSIP arrangements, they may well work, I don't know, on an interim basis, but I would have real concerns that if we get bogged down in that, or SPT gets bogged down in that, that the interim becomes the arrangements for an indeterminate period, and that really wouldn't suit anyone. Franchising is something that I think that we need to see as quickly as possible and go as broadly as possible, and I would like to say very much that I'm strongly in favour of this response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come now to Councillor Ross?
Yes, thanks very much, Joe. I would like to thank Colin for his report as well. It very much sums up exactly what took place at the meeting, which I was in attendance at. And the expressions put forward by Colin on behalf of this council were very much, again, the expressions put forward by most of the members that were there on the board. One of the questions I did raise was on just how exactly franchising would affect a council like ours that has a large number of rural areas, and could we have some clarification on just exactly how that would work in essence. And I was assured at that time that a franchise operator would need to take the good runs with the bad runs, so that our rural areas, instead of having a diminished service, could see the advantage of a franchise working in their favour, because operators would need to take the bad runs with the good runs. So I was refreshed by that approach, and hopefully that will be the way it works out. There wasn't a lot of support for BSIP, as Colin says. It's there in the background, but certainly I hope that we get this within the 5-year period that we're talking about. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll come to Councillor Allison.
Yeah, being at the same meeting, yeah, that Colin has come over with today is very much the feeling of the Transport Committee as it was. One of the things about ticketing was actually knowing, not integrated buying of tickets, but who was buying tickets and for what, and getting that level of information so that they can put in appropriate services, if you like. I'm actually beginning to wonder, John, whether we should have stuck a declaration of interest in here, because we'll have a decision to take at SPT in June. And if we're actually saying today that we're taking a decision here before we know all the information, I'm a little bit dubious and might need a level of assurance as to what our position is.
Person on that board, but I would take direction, yeah, I'd be happy to take direction.
Ian?
I think, I mean, ultimately, the council that appointed you both back in the statutory meeting, I'm assuming. I mean, ultimately, there's no substantive decision, if you like, here around this in terms of putting this forward. We could note it for transparency purposes. I think I would be content, though, from my perspective, in terms of your involvement in this, and it then going on to the SPT board.
Okay. Just finally, then, what you were discussing about I forgot the initials for the joint up thinking, but not being suitable for a long-term future is quite right. But what do we do in the next 5 to 7 years if that is the time that it's going to take for a franchise to be implemented? What's worse, having no change for 5 to 7 years, or trying, is that, sorry, give me the initials. Yeah.
Improvement Partnership.
What is going to be worse, using that or leaving things the way they are for the next period of years with no improvement? I don't think the second one is at all acceptable. Thank you.
Right, I'm not sure if that was a rhetorical question in which to finish, or if that was a question to respond to, but what could I suggest that your question has identified, I think, the reservations that we have and the reason why the response has been constructed in the way it has. Could I come to Davy McLachlan?
Thanks, Chair. Like everyone else, I absolutely welcome this report, in particular recommendation 1. It's something that I've long argued for, going back some 20 years. I've got a question, but I wanted to comment on what Alec Allison has said. Waiting 7 years, you've got to start somewhere, and if we'd started 20 years ago, when I had been sort of campaigning for this in my days at SPT, it would already be in place right now. So we've got to start somewhere, I think, and right now we should go ahead with that. But I've got a question for Colin. The £15 million, being a bit ignorant, I suppose, in asking that there's bound to be some complications in doing this, but why would it cost £15 million? Where would that funding be directed to? What would need to be spent in order to have the franchise situation?
Thanks, Chair and Councillor McLachlan. I'll come back to you with the detail on that, Councillor McLachlan, because it's again not directly involved with what SPT's business case is saying, but I would expect as you move forward, you're having to do further business case development work. You're having to engage with businesses. You're having to put in technology behind the scenes. You'd have to be developing, models of delivery, staffing, etc. So it's costly. The important thing I would say though is the 50 million isn't there just now. So what SPT are looking to do here is to develop the business case, go and probably lobby Scottish Government for that funding, probably expect at some point a discussion with local councils to see whether they can contribute towards that, and obviously we all know what the kind of current financial position is. So the detail of that, I'm sorry I don't have that to hand, but I can certainly kind of look into that in a little bit more detail for you.
Yeah. Chair, can I come back? Yeah. I mean, it's £15 million, but in the scheme of things and over a period of time and the benefits it will bring, I think it's worth it. It's not that I'm not in favour of that money being spent. And one of the benefits is, and it's probably in response to John Ross's question, I've got a lot of experience of working with, not working with, but speaking to bus companies across Europe who do have the franchise scheme, and it's for that exact purpose, John. You have a busy corridor where it's a lucrative corridor. So if you want to operate in that corridor where you're going to make a lot of profit, you say, well, you must provide the hospital runs here on a Sunday or a nighttime service here or there or whatever, and in the door. That's exactly why a franchise does work, and it's absolute nuts that since 1986, since the Transport Act came into force and it deregulated the bus industry, it's absolute nuts that we haven't, that we've taken so long to be now looking at it very seriously. It's just a shame. And if we had done it 20 years or so, we wouldn't have this situation. So absolutely welcome it, and John, that's exactly one of the main benefits of having a franchise. The owners of the franchise dictate to the operators what services are required in an area, and you take it or leave it, and the bus companies will take it. Fares will reflect where they're going to make a profit and so on, and it will work. It does work. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I don't know if there was a question in that, but anything you want to come back on, Colin? No? Okay. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to take the remaining points just as they come. So, Councillor Lindsay Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. David just kind of covered what I was going to say about. I'm really. I've not been here 20 years though. I'm just really happy to hear the thing about like franchising, about the especially in rural areas, the runs that aren't favourable will be taken up, as well as the runs that are favourable. In my ward, in particular, mine and Eileen's ward, we've had an issue with buses. Well, in Davies' ward as well. We've had an issue with buses for years and years and years in Law Village, and it was one of the first things that I did when I became a councillor, and people still go on about it when you're chatting doors, and there's still not been a solution to it. And there's 8 buses an hour run on the main road, but not one of them will come in to the village because they don't want to miss customers on the main road. Which is an absolutely ridiculous situation to come in, because they probably would get more customers if they did come into the village. But it's just really, really positive. It's a massive issue in the rural area, and that was highlighted in the STAG report as well, that was taken forward. So just really, I welcome this report, which everybody obviously does. And the integrated ticketing stuff is really important as well. So that's a really good addition to the paper. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks. Could I take Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. I won't welcome the report and echo all of the comments that have been made. We spoke about, Kirsten spoke very eloquently as usual about climate change. The major issue, or the second major issue for climate change, is getting people out their cars. And we won't be able to do that until, as everybody knows here, transport is far more accessible to them and reaches far more people than the bus companies do at the moment. And that's what we hope that the franchise will do. In terms of reducing miles travelled, I mean, I always have a concern that should be about accessing different types of transport, public transport, electric vehicles, electric buses, all the rest of it, not about keeping people in their homes and not going out and communicating and mixing with people, instead being socially isolated, which is always a concern when I hear that phrase about reduced miles travelled. So I think there should be a national focus in this in terms of the finance of the 15 million. Given the fact and its impact on climate change, there should be a national focus in this from the Scottish Government. So I don't know, if at some point there will be other, funding pots, under the umbrella of climate change that could be accessed through this. So that's basically what I wanted to say with regard to the report, and also to ask maybe further down the line, in terms of the franchises, would there be any feasibility or room for putting some sort of condition in that companies have to over time transfer to electric vehicles? Thank you.
Colin, do you want to pick up that last question?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Walker, I would expect any kind of future franchise to include that as kind of an area to move to. If not, if it's going to take 7 years, I would hope it starts with day one. We need to just kind of keep some pressure on SBT. We will remain part of the groups developing this, and if we can deliver the change we're talking about in terms of recommendation 1 sooner, then we will, and we'll obviously encourage a move to kind of EV, electric, or any other low carbon vehicle to ensure the services are appropriate. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robb.
Thank you, and thanks for your comments, Margaret. Happy to approve the report, and thanks for your work on it, Colin. We've talked about this quite a big funding gap in this project, isn't it, to make it happen? So when we're talking about finite budgets, where are our priorities? That's what we've just made the decision to put £30 million into, or approve the progress of a road expansion programme. There's finite budgets. We need to make sure that all our projects are fully aligned with poverty, economic development, climate action, and public transport as well. So a bus franchise model could have been supported by some of these finite pot that we've put in to a road expansion project. I'm just seeing there's too many contradictions here, but I think it's a good report. Thanks, Colin. I just want to remind ourselves, where are our priorities for making decisions on these things? Things don't happen in isolation. Approving a road expansion project in one report, then begging for money for SBT or whoever in the next we have to put our money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've got one more question here from Margaret Cooper, and then I'll bring this to a close. Margaret.
Thanks, Chair. 2 points. I wondered if we have a survey of the number of villages in the rural areas that don't have any public transport. I know of 2 in our area, Sanford, and they don't have any, and Gilmerton don't have any public transport, and people are really crying out for that, and I wondered how widespread that was across the council. My second point is, I can't agree with Kirsty about not prioritising the road in East Kilbride. I think we have a strong commitment as councillors to ensure that people have safe and easy access to routes to work, and for companies to have development opportunities to expand their businesses, etc., out into areas such as East Kilbride and through that to Rutherglen Transport Corridor. So that is a priority. And the fact of the matter is we just don't have enough money to go round. And that reflects back to the Scottish Government, who invest money in certain areas and not in others. But hopefully we might see a difference in that in the coming weeks and months with the new leader they have. But I can't agree with Kirsty. I think that it is a major priority to get this work done in the East Kilbride area. We've been talking about it for the 12 plus years that I've been on the council, and it's time we brought the project to a speedy conclusion. to the benefit of all those who commute and who want to have businesses that are feasible and easily reached up in that area. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you. Colin, there was a question there about rural access to services, and I think actually there was a Centre for Cities report out just a couple of months ago that picked up on some of this, but I don't know if we have any data. Do you want to respond to that point, and we'll just note the other points?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of that information for South Lanarkshire, no, I don't have access to that now. What I would say is I can certainly raise Councillor Cooper's point with SPT. I know there's probably several towns and villages that maybe don't have standard bus services, but SPT would also always say that the MyBus initiative that they have has bus service access for all towns and villages in South Lanarkshire. So, Councillor Cooper, I'll maybe pick that one up with you directly, and I'll have a chat with SPT for you as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have another hand which will come to in just a second. I'm very conscious of time, so before I said that would be the final point. What I'm going to, we've got 2 items for noting, and then we have some business to take in private. So once we've concluded this, I'm going to call for a short break, and then we'll run through the remaining items. John, last point on this.
Yes, thanks, Joe, and thanks for letting me in. It'll be a short comment. I was at the launch of Third Sector campaign last week in Straven, and we heard from a number of local organisations that were operating transport, which was invaluable to local communities. This is something which the third sector could take forward in a bigger way within this 5 years that we're talking about. It's a valuable lifeline to those communities. So, you know, all power to their elbow, and hopefully more and more people will use these third sector organisations to get where we want to be in the meantime. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much. Thank everyone for your contributions. I will simply say that we should be running bus services as a public service. Public transport should be a public service, and that should be the overriding priority. And can I ask us to agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Can we take a 10-minute break? We'll be back at 25 to, and with your support, we'll get through those remaining items hopefully by lunchtime. Okay, folks, get ready to restart this meeting. Right, okay. Thank you very much, folks. We'll restart the meeting now, and I'll come to the first of our items for noting, item 11, which is on South Lanarkshire's Progressive Housing Framework. And Stephen Gibson is going to speak to this report. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. This report's on page 75 to 78 of your pack, and the framework itself is Appendix 1, is in pages 79 to 98. And I should say from the outset, this is a joint report between Housing and Colleagues in Health and Social Care. So the purpose is to provide an overview of the Progressive Housing Framework and to describe how the framework will be implemented between ourselves and Health and Social Care to provide improved outcomes for local people. Background section 3, this is a new approach. It's been delivered collaboratively. It's got the aim of responding to people's housing and support needs, and aims to promote independence and to rethink our operating models in relation to the type and mix of housing we provide, the location of that housing and the care that we provide within that housing. Section 3.2 talks about the approach. It confirms the alignment, as you would expect, between the local housing strategy and the strategic commissioning plan. It reaffirms this joint objective we have to ensure that people with particular needs are supported to live independently in suitable and sustainable houses in a community setting. And finally, when we're considering the development of new affordable housing, the approach shows that we'll be giving consideration to how we can better use the Strategic Housing Investment Plan to develop projects that meet identified local needs for local people. Section 4 covers provides an overview of the framework. Section 4.1 clarifies how the Council will work together with the HSCP to deliver outcome-based approaches when people choose to stay or move. Of course, many people prefer to stay in their own home and rather than moving, and the framework sets out the practical assistance that we can provide to allow people to live safely and independently. And that's set out in Table 1 within the framework, and that's page 85 of the framework if you're flicking through there. And the document summarises the stay options, and these include adaptions, community alarm, sensors and tech-enabled housing. It then describes when these options are appropriate before discussing the eligibility criteria for each. Of course, in relation to move, some people need to move because their existing home or house is unsuitable for their needs. And Table 2 on page 89 of the framework covers this. It sets out the options available, and these include social rented housing, private rented sector options and home ownership. For the social rented sector, the framework provides a description of each of the options and again describes the eligibility criteria for each of them. Section 5 strays into more, and this is about identifying suitable sites and building more specialist homes to meet changing and future needs for local people. Developed through the Strategic Housing Investment Plan and funded through the Affordable Housing Programme, the approach highlights the joint working between ourselves and colleagues in health and social care and the planning authority to build the right house types in the right location to meet future needs and aspirations, of course subject to the availability of funding. In summary, where the best options to stay an existing home or move somewhere else, the Housing and Technical Resource and the Health and Social Care Partnership work together in a strategic and systematic way to identify the most appropriate housing-based solution for individuals. Section, if I can split that out, Section 4.6 of the Progressive Housing Framework also encompasses the new Home and Health Assessment. This assessment will help us to determine the award of medical priority points under the terms of the new allocations policy, and to consider if an applicant can be supported to stay in their current home or be prioritised to move to a new home due to their changing needs. In terms of the next steps, we're promoting the framework across staff teams, partners and stakeholders, and we'll be doing this through a series of officers' briefings, which are scheduled to be complete by the end of May. We'll provide progress reports or continued progress reports to the IJB, and later this year we'll also be reporting on progress to the Housing and Technical Resource Committee when considering the SHIP for 25 to 30. If I could take you back to the recommendations in section 2, and these are for noting that the progressive housing framework be noted and the arrangements for implementing the framework be noted. Thanks very much, and happy answering questions.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are any questions, could you please indicate now? I'll come to Andrea Cowan first.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stephen. Another comprehensive report, lots of detail, lots of information, and everything looking good. I just have one small query. On table 1 on page, table 2 on page 89, it goes through the different types of homes for people who need support. So amenity housing, you can apply if you're over 60. Technology enabled housing, you're over 65, sheltered over 66, and obviously care homes being the ultimate sort of support package. And I just wondered where people who are younger adults fall into this. You know, if they require a move and they also need support, somebody with a long-term physical impairment perhaps. And I ask this because I actually have a friend whose son in his 20s ended up in a care home with elderly people round about him for almost a year, which obviously before he managed to get accommodation, this was in Glasgow. So I just wondered how these types of rare cases, thankfully, but how these types of cases would be looked at in this framework. Thanks.
Stephen, Sharon? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Cowan. I can update on that. So as part of the health and medical assessment that we're now undertaking, which is in conjunction with our colleagues at Health and Social Care Partnership, those kind of rare cases or adults with younger adults or young people even, families with children with specific medical needs, these are taken account as part of that medical and health assessment. That will determine an assessment where someone will be awarded the highest level of medical priority need points. Each of those cases we aim to rehouse as quickly as possible. We set a kind of 6-month timescale to try and to prioritise those. We will look at these in conjunction with Health and Social Care Partnership with OT and assess a property that suits their needs. Very recently we've did that as part of a new build site at the Old Phillips factory with Level Development, where we had a young adult that had significant needs and we had to take account of that. So we will do that as part of our planning, and that will be part of the SHIP and our new build discussions as well.
Great. So there's flexibility
yes.
in the plan. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, could I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. One of the decisions we had to take in the spring at the budget to get a balanced budget was to take a saving of 1.052 million out of the adaptions budget, and I was wondering how that has affected this report in terms of the properties, etc. Is it lengthening time delays? Is it meaning people aren't getting the adaptions they need to stay in their own homes? What has been the outcome from that saving?
Stephen?
The outcome from the saving is that we've got a clear focus on prioritisation, so people who need adaptions still get the adaptions, and we're making sure that the right people get the right adaptions. So the outcome of it is it's linked to making sure that people get the right adaptions at the right time, and I'm not hearing of any outcomes which are negative as a consequence of that.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to say, as Chair of Social Work, just to welcome the report and the close collaboration in terms of the Health and Social Care Partnership and housing. Housing is pivotal and crucial to being able to actually implement the key strategies and objectives within the commissioning plan, and particularly when you think of the situation regarding older people and the increase in demand and the desire, at least the aspiration, to meet people's desires and choices in terms of how they want to live that part of their life. And I think Andrea makes a very good point in relation to younger people with needs as well, and we have discussed that about how we can encompass that into future developments and looking at more innovative developments, so that the only option for a person with disabilities, or whether it's mental health issues, is not just access to a residential home. Very frequently with people who are in a different set of circumstances and much older. But just I think it's really excellent that that's now all encompassed into the housing investment plan, because it does open the door to accessing you know, additional resources and extra resources. And I really look forward to being involved and taking a part of how this evolves. I know we're currently looking at sites and considering various different types of solutions to implementing the commissioning strategy and being able to meet people's needs. So I would just like that on record that I'm very happy as the chair of the social work to be working so closely as one is equally dependent on the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. Can I come to Mo Razak?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the comprehensive report, Stephen. I've got a question on the technology-enabled housing. So I'm going to give a scenario where a couple apply for this through social work because one of them requires it, the other one doesn't. Then the person that requires it passes away. So you're left with one person that's not eligible for technology-enabled housing. Now, that would mean that they would need to move out of that house. So what would the procedure be? Would they be put back to the area they're looking for? The reason I'm asking this is that this would be quite important to a couple that are moving around in these houses.
Okay, I think either Stephen or Sharon are making their mind up. Sharon, right, okay.
Apologies, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to pick that up. If it was a joint tenancy, then the other tenant would have full rights to remain there. We wouldn't be able to enforce them to vacate their tenancy. However, we would look at it and try and explore a management transfer if the person was willing to be relocated to alternative housing, freeing up that property that would suit someone else's particular needs. But if it was a joint tenancy, then legally they would have the rights to remain there and we wouldn't enforce that. Also, there's other rights under the Housing Scotland Act where if it was a mother and daughter had been resident there for over 12 months, then she would have the rights to succeed to that tenancy. And again, although that property had specific needs that wasn't maybe relevant to that young person or individual, they would still have the right to succeed to that tenancy. It's all in line with their tenancy agreement.
Chair, if it's say husband and wife or civil partners, surely it should be an automatic the right for both of them to that property. But should not be automatically put through the tenancy on both names?
We would normally, if it was a husband and wife, it would generally be a joint tenancy. So that meant if one person passed away, the other person would automatically just become the sole tenant, yeah. So we wouldn't ask anyone to vacate.
Okay. I'll just take this off afterwards then.
Eileen Logan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wholeheartedly agree with the progressive housing, and I think it's the way forward for any council to look at the structure of what they have and what they might want for the future. And I think it's important that there is joined up now with social services. I think for too long we worked in silos. Each department or each director did what they were doing, but there wasn't maybe the tie-up between the two, and I think that's a great thing. Recently, from something else I was doing, I actually kind of knew about the age groups or the ageing population in Scotland, but it actually came home really, really quite forcibly, where 1/5 of the population in Scotland, I think, is over 65, and I think it was 35 or 45,000 people are now living to the age of over 90, which was never ever heard of before. And I'm always surprised as well that we're all in shock now. Here's all these people and what we're going to do, and we've all been here for all our lives, so it shouldn't be a surprise that we have people living longer and requiring adaptations or specialised services. So it really was quite astonishing to me to see the numbers. And I know that this is only, or will be, just a start, and probably a drop in the big, big ocean that we need to, you know, sort out. But it is a start, and it's a good start. And the longer that people can remain in their properties, I think is right. And I hope that over the years we do crack on and progress between two services, and that we can manage as best we can. But I think it's a good report, excellent report, and it's a great start. And wholeheartedly, I would give you every support that I could. And I know that you're also engaging with the elderly forums and the various different things, and that's a good thing as well, that we're not working in isolation saying we know best, that you're actually bringing people in who would probably maybe require the services, or in a few years' time might require services. So the whole joined up approach is first class, and I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands, so this report is just for noting, so can we note that report, and we will move now to item 12, which is on the homelessness pressures, impact and mitigations, and can I ask Sharon Egan to speak to that paper. Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. So the purpose of the report this morning is to update Executive Committee on the unprecedented demand for a statutory homelessness service, and particularly the demand and the need for temporary accommodation. The report will also highlight actions that have been progressed already to help mitigate these continued challenges. So just taking you to section 3, the background of the report. A report was presented to Housing and Technical Resource Committee on the 7th of February this year. This detailed the unprecedented pressures that we're currently facing our homelessness service in South Lanarkshire. It highlighted that there was no sign of abatement in the significant increase in levels of homelessness experienced over the last 18 to 24 months. And I must update as well that that continues to do so. At year end, we have seen 2,720 homeless presentations in South Lanarkshire. It also highlighted extremely challenging circumstances that are not just affecting South Lanarkshire in isolation, but has been mirrored nationally across the country. So the report to our Housing and Technical Resources Committee also emphasised that the Council and its partners have had a strong track record in trying to alleviate and prevent homelessness through the years. The commitment to prevent and alleviating homelessness has continued to be our strategic focus for over 20 years, which is set out within the local housing strategy and our community plan. Section 4, I'll just summarise in terms of the national and local context, given this is a paper for noting, but just to kind of highlight some of the changes over the years. So in 2017, the Scottish Government established the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group. This led to a solution to attempt to end homelessness. Further to that, a rapid rehousing transition plan was then set out and agreed by the Scottish Government. This was a 5-year plan that local authorities adhered to. There was an amount of funding provided to try and end homelessness. We had requested a higher value of funding through the RRTP. However, notwithstanding the shortfall that we received, there was significant tangible success was achieved in the early years. So that was through a combination of funding to prevent homelessness, and we developed our housing options service. There was additional funding to support and meet complex needs in terms of housing support and intensive housing support. We were able to flip temporary accommodation and change that to be permanent housing, given we had a reduced demand in homelessness, and we had a renewed focus and partnerships approach with our third sector. So at the same time, whilst we've been continuously performing well, there's other aspects that we've been adding to that. So more than 50% of our available homes were allocated to homeless households over the last 4 years. During that point in the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, we had 0 breaches of the unsuitable accommodation order, which a breach in the unsuitable accommodation order would be anyone in bed and breakfast for longer than a week. So we had never achieved that until 2023-24, where we had 11 breaches. We had a significant growth in our temporary accommodation. We've increased our temporary furnished flats, which are normal homes within normal communities, from 609 units in 2022 to we're now sitting at 705, plus we've introduced emergency flats. So just to kind of give a bit of national context, over the past year there's been significant debate around the pressures on the homelessness and housing system. There was a thematic review completed by the regulator in February 23. In July 23, Solace set out a report which detailed a wide range of concerns and highlighted the chronic shortage in supply of affordable housing. Over recent months, other local authorities have now declared housing emergencies in Scotland. Those were Argyll and Bute, the City of Edinburgh, Glasgow City Council and Fife, and only recently, just on Thursday, Western Bartonshire did the same. This discussion has continued. I personally and other members of my management team have continued to meet the Scottish Government. We have been raising the concerns that we are seeing and that the levels are not stopping. So we are continuing to have that dialogue. In terms of the current position in South Lanarkshire, it's Section 5. Whilst I do want to reiterate that we are a top performing local authority, which is set out within some of the achievements that we've did the year to date, the last 2 years have been significantly concerning in terms of the levels. So we've seen a 28% increase in the number of people applying to the Council for assistance. We've seen a 38% increase in the people being recorded as having a homelessness decision. And we've seen a 101% increase in the backlog of urgent need of households waiting in temporary accommodation. So on several occasions over the last 6 months, we've been highlighting the scale of the challenges that we are facing here within South Lanarkshire with both the regulator and with the Scottish Government. This is featured within our engagement plan this year with the Scottish Housing Regulator, and we'll continue to meet with them throughout the year to discuss how we are continuing to tackle the increase in demand. The report to our committee, to Housing Tech Committee in February, detailed mitigations that we were now putting in place. So I can confirm that these have now been taken forward with there's 4 key issues within the report, which was to address the significant increase in the number of households in temporary accommodation at any given time, maintain a sufficient supply of appropriate temporary accommodation so that we weren't accessing bed and breakfast or any unsuitable accommodation. We wanted to improve the timescales for homelessness households being allocated their suitable and permanent home, and we want to reduce the number of children who are currently experiencing homelessness. At the start of the financial year, we had over 500 children in the homelessness service, and that's something we're really keen to reduce as the year goes forward. So Section 6 breaks down these actions and mitigations that were approved at our committee in a lot more detail, which included a review of individual personal housing plans for each one of our homelessness households, which is due to be completed for the end of this month. In terms of Section 7, we speak about next steps. So those range of actions that we set out at committee in February have been taken forward. We intend to take a review document to the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan to our own Housing and Tech Committee in August, and we also intend to provide regular updates at our own committee on a 6-monthly basis in terms of our homelessness timescales and our caseload. We continue to monitor the situation at a national level, and will continue to have dialogue with the Scottish Government and civil servants in the coming months. I have a meeting with the Minister for Housing again later in the month of May just to discuss our position here in South Lanarkshire. Moving on to Section 8, there are no employee implications at this time. However, we are continuing to monitor the wellbeing and resilience of our staff. In terms of Section 9, the financial implications, we are having management, there's things going on in order to us to maintain the homelessness budget. We've made decisions internally to do that. However, we want to note that it's a fragile position and that any continued demand or surge in demand it could have an impact on that. So just want to take you back to recommendations, which, as I said, the paper is for noting. So just to note the scale and nature of the increase in demand for homelessness, both nationally and locally. Note the heightened pressure and the impact within South Lanarkshire resulting from this increase, which exceeds the national experience. And finally, that the actions being progressed to help mitigate the pressure detailed at Section 5 of the report is noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for that report. very serious issues being brought to the committee today. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you please indicate now? Could I come to John Anderson?
Thanks, Chair. It's a comment rather than a question. I'd just like to reiterate what I'd raised when the town centre application came to the Community and Enterprise, and my colleague raised it again today, agenda item 7. We have an opportunity here to build 300 to 400 social housing in the East Kilbride Centre. If we take that opportunity, this will help. There is a chronic shortage of housing all over Scotland, partly due to when the Tories started selling off the houses, and we have never recovered from that. So we need to start trying to recover, and I would urge the administration to ensure that these 300 to 400 houses being built on council land is actual social housing. Thank you.
Thank you. And the administration would urge the Scottish Government to reverse their cuts to housing funding. Could I come to Councillor Hose?
Yes, thank you. Very thorough report, and it's most welcome. I've just got a couple of questions, mainly for myself, but also from a constituent who is a private landlord, and anecdotally her colleagues in private land ownership. Have you had any feedback from people who are presenting themselves homeless that this has happened because many private landlords during the period of the rent freeze had to move out because the landlords had sold their properties and portfolios? My other question is, could you put a figure on the quite worrying number of B&Bs from 30 to 700? That's quite upsetting, actually, that we're in that position. But what does that mean when it comes to the council funding and that? If you could, thank you.
Sharon?
Thank you. So, whilst the exit from the private sector has not been the biggest reason for people presenting as homeless, we have seen a number of people, and it's particularly within the East Kilbride area, who have lost their private let as a result of the landlord deciding to exit the market as a result of the rent restrictions and deciding that it's a time to take the opportunity and sell the property. We have also seen that in our temporary accommodation portfolio. We lease a number of properties from private landlords, particularly within the East Kilbride area, and again, those landlords have decided they want to sell their property. So at that point, we are then trying to use the National Acquisition Programme and buy those back so that we can at least retain that within our housing portfolio. But yeah, we are seeing that. To answer your other point around bed and breakfast, I do want to reiterate that back in 21-22, bed and breakfast was not an accommodation that we used. And just to kind of give a bit of context to there, and it's kind of stark reality that in 21-22, we only had 53 nights stay in bed and breakfast for the full year across a range of different households, which in terms of the budget was less than £3,000. And this past financial year, we have had 1,400 nights stay in bed and breakfast at a cost of just over 102,000. So that shows the difference. But we have been trying our best to offset that. As I mentioned, we had just over 600 temporary furnished flats across South Lanarkshire. We've increased that to 705. And it's a balancing act because you're trying to not take a property out the letting pool that could be a permanent offer. But also we have increased, introduced emergency flats, and they are in more kind of rural areas. And then that was at a point to try and stop what we thought there was a culture happening around bed and breakfast where people were quite happy to access some of the bed and breakfast hotels that we were using. But again, they're fully utilised, there are people living in them, and the pressure's on to try and move these people on and keep throughput. So our first stop accommodation is fully utilised, it's maximised on a daily basis, but that's where we try and move people on to keep the throughput.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Davy McLachlan?
Thanks, Chair. Sharon, I wonder if you could comment, I've got a bit of knowledge on it, but I wonder if you could comment on the impact of the removal of the local connections and how that's impacting on homelessness, because you can elaborate, but it basically allows for people out with the area to apply to be homeless, not in an area they're associated with, and that has a dramatic increase, caused a dramatic increase, and we're unfortunate I suppose, living so close to Glasgow. So if you could comment for the rest of the members on that. And in relation to John Anderson's point, yeah, we would love to build 300 houses in East Kilbride. I wonder if maybe you could speak to the new First Minister and see if he could claw back in the cuts that have been proposed for the affordable housing programme. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to come to Sharon on that point there, particularly about local connection. Could I add something that was raised with me before, which was the situation around the backlog in asylum claims, which we now appear to see a bit of a clearing in that backlog, large numbers in Glasgow and being granted leave to remain. What's the exposure of South Lanarkshire to that in light of what Councillor McLachlan has raised?
Thank you. So to answer the first point, the removal of the local connection from the homelessness legislation has made an impact. Just to update councillors, that allows then anyone in Scotland to present as homeless in any local authority that they wish. So they can leave South Lanarkshire or someone else can present to South Lanarkshire from another out with local authority. So we have been engaging with the Scottish Government around this because this was something that we asked in a time where it has been nationally recognised of a housing crisis. Could that be reinstated so that we could at least deal with the challenge of residents or homeless households from our own local authority? The Scottish Government have requested that they monitor this for a period of time, and there's now a register being recorded where other local authorities are recording who leaves South Lanarkshire and presents to them, and vice versa, we're recording that. But Councillor McLachlan, you're absolutely right. We've seen over 100 applications from applicants from out West South Lanarkshire, so that does have an impact. To add, Councillor Fagan, in terms of your query there around asylum, asylum seekers, as you'll be aware, that the largest population there is Glasgow. It's been the original dispersal city. However, all local authorities now have have to take a proportionate share of that. But there is large numbers that have now been given a right to remain within Glasgow and received a decision and blocking accommodation, where Mears, the provider for asylum seekers, will be moving them on from that. We are monitoring that and the impact of that for those presentations here in South Lanarkshire, because we're really conscious Rutherglen Cambuslang is just a couple of miles across the border from Glasgow, so that continues to be tracked. We have seen an impact already from asylum seekers in the hotel within our own local authority, where we've had just under 20 presentations from people who have received a decision, and some of them have chose to stay because they've been in the local authority now for over 2 years. So they have made homeless applications to us and are currently in temporary accommodation. Similarly, for the change in the Ukrainian policy since January this year, where the Scottish Government has changed that and we require to offer 2 reasonable offers of housing, where applicants have refused that because we have offered Barrack Street, which is our interim accommodation for Ukrainian population. They have also presented as homeless and are in temporary accommodation. So there's a mix of cost of living crisis, some of the impacts in the private rented sector, the humanitarian programmes, all contributing to that backlog. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Andrea Cowan?
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Sharon, for all this information. I just wanted to raise a slight concern. Obviously, the homelessness figures are horrendous. I mean, that's how we deal with that is going to be increasingly difficult. But I'm concerned as well about the knock-on effect to the general waiting list, because quite often, certainly the majority of my casework at the moment is housing, and some people are saying to me, I've been on the list for 2 years and I've never had an offer, and stuff like that. So, and I appreciate the reasons that they haven't had an offer, but it just feels to me that we need to somehow get a grip on the homelessness issue, because it's going to have this further knock-on effect. And I just think that we need, and I don't know what the answers are, I'm not going to pretend to, but I do think that we need to have some bold initiatives. Don't play safe. So the thing that's happening with Social Bite in my ward in Rutherglen, there is some community kickback on that, but hopefully as we go through the process, this will be a success. It will only house 15 individuals, but I'm told that in their Edinburgh project over the last 6 years, they've had over 100 people through the system. So I think we need to start looking at these sort of things and looking at avoiding the homelessness situation in the first instance. Again, these are things that, you know, would have to be looked at. I can say that a flat next to my mum in her close was rented out for £900 a month, a 2-bedroom flat for the last 3 years. And the landlord, the girl who rented it, she said, oh, that's the end of my lease. He's put the rent up to £1,250. And she then had to leave, and he's now rented it out. So, you know, there are other issues with the private sector, not just that they're selling up, but they're outpricing, you know, the individuals. So there's lots to look at, and I think that I mean, we start thinking outside the box a bit and see where we go. But and again, I know we don't have the money to build 300 council houses in East Kilbride, but you know, again, by maybe working with housing associations or with private builders, and maybe just, as I say, come up with some bold initiatives, we might be able to get a bigger share of that housing than we normally would. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'll take John Anderson again, and then I have one more question before we bring this to a conclusion. John?
To you and David, the problem doesn't lie with the Scottish Government with the cuts. The problem lies with Westminster Government, and that is going to be changed shortly. But unless you're going to change from the Tory austerity that was introduced by the Tories and the Liberal Democrats, then we'll still be in the same position. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm maybe just going to ask, it leads into the question I was going to ask, which is actually, and incidentally, this is where there is cross-party lobbying of the Scottish Government at COSLA around the capital funding situation, and in particular the Scottish Government's decision to take the sums that they have out of the housing programme. And if there is to be any reinstatement, including, by the way, reinstatement under a future government, COSLA are certainly arguing that housing should be the priority there. Now, we've just had some information in the past week, I think, about how those cuts are likely to be profiled. And the reason I'm going to raise this is I think it's important for people to understand the impact that has on long-term planning, because these aren't just sort of punch and duty politics points. This is really important to how the council plans our SHIP, how we plan housing investment. In particular, the fact that there is very little of this grant that we have surety will be there in 2 or 3 years' time. So, Sharon, do you want to just explain that to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan process, the Scottish Government had previously confirmed that we would receive 5 years, which is a resource planning assumption funding to allow us to develop our SHIP and our new build programme. And for that, it was roughly around £30 million per annum. However, we received the 30 million last year in terms of the grant funding, but for 24-25, obviously, and you'll be aware that on the 19th of December, the Scottish Government announced a significant reduction in the available National Affordable Housing Supply Programme. And we have had confirmation verbally, not formally in writing as yet, however, confirmation verbally that we will receive this year in 24-25 just over 22 million, which is a reduction of 8.03 million, which equates to roughly 26.6%. So that does make implications for us in terms of the number of new build properties we will be able to take forward this year. Ongoing dialogue is continuing with the Scottish Government so that we can get some certainty towards 25, 26, 26, 27 and again finally 27, 28 so that we can continue to meet our target. However, it should be noted that confirmation has not been confirmed at that stage yet in terms of the actual grant available, but assumption levels have been given, which are a reduction in this year, get into the following years again.
And that's the key point. We have to be able to plan over the long term in order to meet the targets that we've set out, and indeed which feed into the governments that the targets that government has set out nationally. I've got, pardon me, I've got 2 questions here. Sorry, Davy McLachlan and then Maureen Chalmers. Davy.
Not so much a question, Chair, just a comment. Sharon and I will be meeting the Housing Minister next week. He's asked for a meeting, but we don't have the agenda yet. We don't know what he wants to discuss, but I sincerely hope that finance is one of those, to just hopefully try and get some surety moving forward around the question you've just asked of Sharon there, because you know, you just can't programme. There is a ship in place, but you just can't work with that if you're going to continue to have your budget cut.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I have to say the feedback that I've got is actually the level of engagement with the Housing Minister from this council is actually, and their officials, is actually very positive. So there are avenues where we're pursuing this. Maureen Chalmers.
Thanks, Chair. Just for information, it's just with my COSLA hat on, really. But you'll be aware that there was a decision to set up a special interest group at COSLA. So that's the kind of group with a number of senior councillors involved, as well as a kind of spread of officers. There was a meeting yesterday, and one of the things we were updated on was the Housing Investment Task Group that has been set up. Just at its first meeting, I'm a member of that group. And it'll be reporting through COSLA's usual governance channels. It's promising. It's kind of something that I know Alatro channel will be involved in that, are involved in too. But there's also the Community Wellbeing Board. There's also a Housing Conveners meeting next month, at the end of this month. So there's a lot of activity to make sure at a political level we're engaging and engage well with the Minister. As you said, unfortunately, he was unable to come along yesterday just with the current changes. So we're hoping that after today, the dates in the diary will be honoured by whoever's in that position going forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Look, this is a really serious issue, as I say, and no doubt one we're going to return to. If there are no other questions, I would just note this report, and I'll come now to the... Well, I have no items of urgent business under 13, so I have to come now to this point, excluding the press and public from the meeting. So I can confirm that the public section of the meeting has now concluded, as the remaining items of business may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information in terms of paragraphs 2, 6 and 9 of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Members of the committee will now go on to consider the exempt business without the press and public present. And I'm just going to ask the clerk to confirm that that is the case, and that the